All right, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to our guests joining us from around the world. We're very pleased to have you join us for the digital launch of the IFA study entitled Analyzing Decolonial Climate Perspectives, the Case of the Brazilian Legal Amazon Region. So my name is Marianna Evenstein. I am a journalist based in Berlin, Germany, and on behalf of IFA, it is my pleasure to be moderating today's online event. Just a quick reminder to everyone, you should see a button at the bottom of the screen that will allow you to select your preferred language. So either English or Portuguese, or if you can follow both languages, you don't need interpretation. So go ahead and select your preferred language if you have not already done that. Another note to everybody that today's event is being recorded and will later be uploaded to YouTube, so you can share it later with anybody who is unable to join us live for today's conversation. You should also see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen that is there for you to write in your questions or comments for our speakers. We will have an opportunity to get to your questions towards the end of the hour, but you are free to write them in at any time during the discussion today, and we will hopefully be able to get to as many of your questions as possible during our panel talk. All right. I know that if you're joining this meeting, it means we can assume that most of you are aware that the latest report by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change acknowledged that indeed colonialization is one of the drivers of the climate crisis. And throughout the world, we can still see just how colonial legacies and also a sort of imbalance, let's say, in the dynamics of power between different countries. All of these things continue to shape international cooperation and also influence climate policy. And this is precisely why it is so crucial to incorporate a decolonialization perspective if we want to develop effective solutions to the climate crisis on a global scale, right? And the only way we will be able to tackle the global catastrophe is if the entire world works together. Now, I think it's safe to say that Germany's commitment to supporting Brazil's efforts to tackle climate change is generally recognized by many, right? But we also have to acknowledge that there is nevertheless a certain degree of mistrust, right? And in some cases, this can be traced to perhaps a lack of understanding about what Germany's underlying interests are. Why are they in Brazil? What are they really going after? What are they motivated by? So how exactly can Germany strengthen trust and also its partnership with Brazil when it comes to environmental and climate issues? And also important, how do local stakeholders and activists view Germany's role? And another important question is, how would a decolonialized approach to international cooperation with Germany or other European countries look? Now, this latest report by IFA investigates these and also many other related questions, but to tell you more details about the report and its authors, I'm now pleased to hand over to Adila Tribel. She is Head of Dialogue and Research at IFA. Ms. Tribel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marianna Evenstein. Welcome on behalf of IFA, Institut für Auslandsbeziehungen. As Marianna has said, my name is Odila. I'm Head of Dialogue and Research at IFA. And we work as a competence center for culture in international relations. Cultural relations thereby understood on the basis of trust, understanding, mutuality, and respect. We work evidence-based, and our research aims for interdisciplinary and intersectoral approaches. It is in this context that the research project Is a Decolonial Climate Foreign Policy Even Possible was initiated. The need, as we heard in the intro remarks of Marianna, for international cooperation is very much acknowledged by current global climate negotiations. We ask, how can cultural cooperation support the transition towards more sustainable livelihoods and relations? And what are the challenges of mutual perceptions in engaging in such cooperations? It was the idea of our experts to choose the Brazilian Amazon as a case. I would like to thank once more the authors, Marianna Tano and Pedro Afonso Ivo Franco, for their commitment to this research project and for accepting this difficult and quite complex endeavor to navigate through the different layers of the urgency of the climate challenge on the one hand, and of international and national historical legacies on the other. Welcome again. I wish you all and us and all of us together an insightful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Odila. And now we would like to hand over to Pedro Afonso Ivo Franco and Maria Caetano to give us a summary of the report's key findings. And you have, I believe, 15 minutes to do so. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marianna. Thank you very much, Odila. It's a pleasure. It's an honor being here after almost 1 year on while me and Pedro have been through this research. And as Odila have said, this was the call for application from IFA that wanted to examine a decolonial critique of German international climate policy. And as me and Pedro, we realized that there wouldn't be a better example at this moment of the case of the Brazilian legal Amazon region, and this is what we decided to do. And before we start, we wanted also to do a little moral disclaimer. We are not from the Amazon, which is very important, and this was also a question of a discussion between me and Pedro, like, are we entitled to talk about the Amazon? And that's why we engaged so much with local representatives through proactive consultation and exchange mechanisms, so we could actually portray their perceptions in this study. And we hope that for the future, we will have more researchers from the region featuring more prominent studies such as this one.
So good morning, everyone, from my side, for the ones who are in Brazil. Good afternoon for those who are in Germany. Yes, as Marina said, we have a very interesting task here through this research, because when we saw the call for application from IFA, we realized that the research would have different layers, as we are calling them. This research is talking about culture, is talking about education under the German foreign cultural and educational policies, but it's also talking about the climate layer and the Brazilian Amazon layer. And we are seeing everything, all these layers in international cooperation in an integrated way through a decolonial approach. So we are trying to perceive and realize how all these connections and intersections could be seen more in a holistic way. So the readers, we are very happy today that everybody will be able to read our research. So we invite everyone, all the readers, to understand the research through these layers, through these lenses, through our holistical lenses, as well as through a more political, governmental lenses in which all these layers are sometimes separate within different ministries, within different cabinets, and within different budgets as well. So we are trying to combine all these layers, seeing them through an holistical view, but also through a more governmental view. And when we got this task, we defined 3 blocks of recommendations, being the first one, the overall, the overall 3 blocks of objectives, not recommendations, right? Being the first one, the overall objective, which is analyze the global climate governance towards the Brazilian region through a decolonial perspective. The second block is the specifics objectives that are examine the German climate foreign policy towards the Brazilian Amazon region through a decolonial perspective. The third one, check if there are German policies and programs related to the Brazilian Amazon region which have educational and or cultural components embedded in them. And then we come to the block of recommendations, being the fourth objective, suggest formats of debate within Germany's foreign, cultural, and education policy frameworks that can create space to discuss and reflect based on post and decolonial methodologies. And the last objective related to recommendation is to demonstrate steps to create more bottom-up and decolonial mechanisms embedding German foreign cultural and education components. To do this research, which is scope research in a way, we had to define boundaries, criteria, and level of analysis. The first thing we needed to add was the boundary of the Brazilian legal Amazon. So when we are talking about Amazon region, in other words, we are talking more precisely about the Brazilian Amazon. We also had to see things through the criteria somehow of the global governance on climate to the region. So analyzing milestones to the region in terms of the Brazilian Amazon, towards the Brazilian Amazon. And the third one, German climate foreign policy, was our level of analysis in which we included the German cooperation as the German government institution. So we have as the example the Foreign Office, we have the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development as some of the institutions within the German institutional framework that deal with the Brazilian Amazon.
So again, the geographical focus, as you probably are aware of, is the Brazilian legal Amazon, which is different from the northern region of Brazil. And we are talking about a population of almost 30 million inhabitants, 13% of Brazilian's population. And in terms of size, now we can fit actually 14 Germanys inside Brazilian legal Amazon and parts of Europe as well inside the Brazilian legal Amazon. And the methodology we use in order to do that was a bit of a literature review and there, of course, the theoretical framework. We didn't find many articles and references towards the decolonial approach in the Brazilian legal Amazon per se. We found indirectly in other areas. We did more than 50 semi-structured online and in-person interviews. We used this snowball methodology. So every person we interview indicated more people that could be interested or could have somehow a saying on the perceptions we were looking for. And then we had 3 round tables, 2 in the Amazon region, Belém and Manaus, and the last one, the round table in Berlin that actually happened 2 weeks ago. And we also had an open event to the public and a cultural activity in Belém, which would like to really appreciate Ursula Vidal, which is here with us today. She was the one that helped us organizing this as well, and technical visits in Belém. And we are using a lot of storytelling in order to make the language more reachable for most of the public. So we wanted really that the perceptions we found during these studies are able to be understood for the most people that are able to read this study. And just very quickly, I think it's important in order to align expectations. What is this research not about? We are not here to analyze the impact of programs portrayed or developed with the support of the German international cooperation. We are not measuring impact here, but we are considering the perceptions of people. How do they perceive the international cooperation, and what, through the perceptions, what can we recommend from them? So it's observation, hearings, a lot of perceptions from both sides, and this analysis of narratives.
Yeah, so here we have our first chapter of findings. We are also happy, Marianna and I, because we are coming to an end now in this research. it seemed to us at a certain point that this would never be possible, because every day we were discovering new things and talking with more people. And as she said, there weren't many articles, so we were building things on a daily basis. So today we want to make you curious to read the research. Now we don't have time naturally to talk about every single finding, so we want to give you an overview of what is there, what is the content of our research, right? So in this first moment, in this first chapter, we are talking about global climate governance through decolonial perspectives, doing an analytical framework from post-colonial to decolonial perspectives, and explaining why we are working with decolonial perspectives. And one of the reasons is that colonization is not only about previous or current territory control. Now we are talking about economic, we are talking about influence, power relations, many things related to the decolonial understanding. And we are also bringing down the narrative of cultural inferiority as a colonial justification, as an interesting point of reflection. And here, as Marina said, we are also dealing quite a lot and working quite a lot with storytelling. And the best way we choose to do that was through cartoons that were designed by our designer, Marta Di Ronco, which tells the history of a character that it's a character that goes throughout all the chapters of the studies, and he is somehow the person, the one who is telling the history for us. He's making it simple for the reader to understand in what we want to say in every chapter.
Right, and in order to do that, we found some milestones on the colonial perspectives on climate governance as well, and we've been through them a bit in the study. We are talking about the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, so the acknowledgement that the historical emitters on when it comes to climate change, they have a bigger responsibility. And this was a principle that came out during Rio 1992. And then, of course, you have the Paris Agreement and the bottom-up approach. We had also the attempt to address development through the connections of social, environmental, and economic actions with the famous Sustainable Development Goals are still going on. The UNFCCC adopted climate change as a key reference for negotiations, which we found there was an advance in the debate. We had a bigger presence of cultural organizations in the last conference of parties, so the climate change conference of parties in Glasgow and also in Sharm el-Sheikh. And we had last year the Loss and Damage Fund, which is also related somehow to this common but differentiated responsibilities that we mentioned in the first milestone.
So here now we are also talking about an issue that we are calling it tokenization now. Asking who is actually being considered during the decision-making process. So we have once more our character already in a relationship with indigenous leaders, and you will perceive that we brought this issue because we realized that many indigenous leaders and indigenous figures are present, more and more present in conferences, in COPs, and in events, and we are reflecting about their presence and about the legacy they are leaving in these moments, from these moments on, if they are somehow really being able to negotiate, or if they are more tokenized presence in the event. We have a few pictures to better illustrate our examples that we are extracting from the German representation, foreign representation in Brazil, to somehow bring this discussion on board as well. So here we have a chapter talking about the invention of the Amazon, which it's something interesting for us because we are talking about this idea from the Amazon that was built initially from Europeans and also German explorers like Humboldt. We are also talking about the presence of foreigners in the forest and making this reflection on who is the Amazon expert, if it's the local or if it's the foreigner person, and if it's the local based in the region in Brazil or the ones based in Rio and São Paulo. Marina?
And one of the things about this relationship in the Amazon, as we are talking about distrust, we are talking about a concern on sovereignty, we are talking about partnership, and those three elements, those three actually words were pretty much heard during the interviews and the perceptions that we made. It is like, oh, we have an important partnership with Germany, but at the same time, we don't know what they are doing. There is a distrust on what they're actually being doing there, and there's this saying, there's nothing for us. We felt so the co-creation, the co-participation of the people that are actually being part of the projects and initiatives in the Amazon is very important. We also deal with the idea of guardians of the Amazon. Is it a privilege or is it a burden for the people living there? And we also went through the current international mechanism for financial support of projects and initiatives in the Amazon. Very quickly going through the German international cooperation's policies. We are also dealing with some ambiguities in international cooperation, and a sentence that we heard during the interviews is like, is it the evil twin or the good twin? So there's good things about these partnerships going on, but there are some ambiguities of, for example, foreign companies working in, for example, Pará or in other states of the Brazilian of the legal Amazon region that are not very clear and sometimes go against the things that international cooperation is doing, and also some doubts in what is actually international cooperation. And as well, that in terms of legacy, now what is left when the international cooperation leaves the projects or the initiatives? Now that's skeletons or the garden. So it's the legacy concern of people. This was the picture from last week from Biobok that went to Pará. So we have been having German representatives since Lula went into term in January. We have been having almost every month delegations and the interest of getting strengthening this cooperation with Brazil.
So the last part, it's about the cultural and education perspectives where German can be better anchored in the region. So we have as educational perspectives the explanation about how Germany could take a better approach and how Brazil can also take a better approach in terms of educational exchanges and also terms of valuing traditional knowledge and primary and secondary schools as well. Through more sustainable partnerships focused on the region, we realized there is very few being done, and there are many important researchers and research institutes, many people who could give a say and a better understanding of the region that are in the universities, but also at schools. And the last point, it's about the cultural connections. Now we tend to think about culture from the region only through indigenous crafts and simple things like that, that somehow minimize the greater extent of the culture in the region. So we are bringing here, we are in the month of June in Brazil, so we are bringing two examples, one from the state of Pará and another one from the state of Amazonas, in which we are addressing things that are very big and considerable, so that we broader the understanding. We are saying that there is graffiti in the Amazon because there is a big population and big cities over there. So coming to the recommendations, our last 30 seconds, we have two different blocks of recommendations. In total, there are 25 highlighted in the studies, and the first block of them is suggest the formats of debate within foreign cultural and education policy framework that create this space to discuss and reflect based on post and decolonial methodologies. The first block, it's related to behavior. So we are suggesting a set of trainings and other things to improve the mindset, the mentality from Germany to Brazil. The second block, it's about practice.
All right, the second one is about practice, and one recommendation that we brought is about the coordination between German ministries, about their work in the Brazilian, in general, but also in particular in the Brazilian legal Amazon, because they have different supports projects in the region, and a strategic dialogue could optimize them.
The last block is to demonstrate the steps, the bottom-up and decolonial steps to support programs and policies and projects embedding cultural and education components to them. So we have notions related to centering the marginalized perspective, reshape the imagination about the Amazon, learning with and from each other, and to have a more consistent approach. And the last reminder that cooperation, it's not only about financing, it's also about reviewing the contradictions and improving it. Thank you very much. I hope you could understand us. We are very open for questions. If you have any questions, please let us know. We are free to be contacted as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro Afonso Franco, and also Marina Caetano. I know it was very challenging to give us such a brief summary of a 72-page report in 15 minutes or so. Apologies that we had to rush you a little bit, but of course, this is just the launch event. It's only 1 hour. We do want to have time for our discussion towards the end of the hour. But first, we would also like to get a very brief, a very succinct response to what we just heard from the two of you from two different perspectives. So first, we will hear from someone who is working in the development and climate protection field, and then we will hear from a regional government leader who is from the Amazon state of Pará. We begin with Dr. Thomas Fatheuer. He is member of the Center for Research and Documentation, Chile-Latin America, and he himself has lived and worked in Brazil for 18 years, so nearly 2 decades. And among other things, he was coordinator of the Amazon program of the German Development Service and also an advisor to the GIZ at the Brazilian Ministry of Environment in the framework of an international program for the protection of tropical forests. So he's somebody who has a lot of experience from the field. Dr. Thomas Fatheuer, I know it's not a lot. You do have only 5 minutes for your response, but we will be able to discuss further towards the end of the hour. So now the floor is yours.
Então, vamos trocar para português. Eu vou falar em português, a Ursula também. Estamos em uma parte para o nosso público no Brasil, né, para também falar uma parte das participações em português. Então, eu li o estudo, acho que não está, só existe uma versão preliminar, e também participei do workshop em Berlim. E então, a minha surpresa foi que essa questão da desconfiança é tão forte ainda, né? Vocês frisam bastante isso, que existe uma certa desconfiança sobre o que os alemães, a cooperação alemã está fazendo na Amazônia, que são as intenções reais, etc. Né? E também vocês colocam essa desconfiança num contexto do debate sobre a internalização da Amazônia. Né? Então, a gente tem uma lista de frases de Al Gore, de Mitterrand, etc., que sempre vão parece essa direção de promover a ideia de uma responsabilidade internacional sobre a Amazônia. E recentemente foi o Macron que frisou de novo essas ideias, né, e criou, acho que como razão, uma certa desconfiança. Mas, então, acho que uma coisa importante, o primeiro ponto que eu gostaria de fazer, uma cooperação entre parceiros, numa espécie de decolonial, tem que ser uma cooperação que respeita a integridade nacional, a soberania nacional do Brasil. Então, nas palavras da cooperação internacional, falamos de propriedade, né, de ownership. Acho que toda cooperação tem que ter uma propriedade do Brasil, né? Então, o Brasil tem que estar numa posição de negociar as demandas da cooperação. As demandas não devem ser formuladas na Alemanha, na Europa, tem que ser formulado no Brasil e a cooperação tem que reagir a essas demandas, né? Então, acho que isso é fundamental para uma perspectiva de uma cooperação em termos de parceria. Então, nesse contexto, só para dar uns exemplos, né, que a cooperação realmente esse traz problemas, atua com vários atores no Brasil, né? Tem vários atores alemães que atuam, e atua com vários atores no Brasil também, né? Por exemplo, no mencionado PPG7, esse programa de piloto para a Amazônia e Mata Atlântica, de cooperação no Pará. Estamos no Pará nesse momento, como a Ursula Vidal vai falar, né? Tivemos uma cooperação com SEMA, a Secretaria do Meio Ambiente do Estado do Amazonas. Tinha a cooperação com o Ministério Público Estadual, bem interessante, uma cooperação com o Ministério Público, e tinha uma cooperação com muitas ONGs da Amazônia, do Pará. Tem um parceiro muito importante da cooperação internacional, que é a FASE, que atua em Belém, e que tem um fundo, que é o fundo DEMA, que atua em várias frentes com pequenos projetos na Amazônia. Então, não é uma coisa só, são vários atores no Brasil e na Alemanha, e assim isso traz, obviamente, algumas confusões de vez em quando de entender que não, todos esses atores atuam na mesma linha, mas isso vocês conhecem no Brasil muito bem. A atuação do Ministério da Agricultura talvez não é igual à atuação do Ministério do Meio Ambiente, tanto na Alemanha como no Brasil, né? Então, a gente conhece essa diversidade de atores, de approaches, de políticas dentro da cooperação. E o último ponto que quero falar, existe ainda, acho que um risco de algumas perspectivas coloniais, especialmente na agenda de comércio. Até o presidente Lula, acho que lembrou com razão que um tratado de União Europeia com o Mercosul não pode ser um tratado que promove o Brasil como exportador de matéria-prima e a Europa como um exportador de bens industriais, né? Acho que aqui tem realmente uma discussão séria e importante sobre estruturas coloniais e pós-coloniais dentro da cooperação. A mesma coisa também, essa febre que acontece no momento de hidrogênio verde, né? E ver um país como o Brasil, Colômbia, outros países como fornecedor de uma matéria-prima, hidrogênio verde, né? E não ver dentro do contexto da desenvolvimento regional, nacional do Brasil, mas realmente colocar o Brasil de fornecedor de novo para demandas que existem na Europa e na Alemanha. Acho que isso é uma discussão importante que tem que ser feito. E a última observação, acho que o Brasil tem uma posição muito boa nesses debates, porque o Brasil é um país que tem muitas pessoas altamente qualificadas, tem instituições qualificadas, e então pode enfrentar muito bem esse diálogo sobre caminhos de cooperação, uma posição de conhecimento e de qualificação. Acho que isso também é muito importante. Então, vocês colocaram essa coisa dos experts da Amazônia. Tudo que eu vivi também 5 anos no Belém do Pará, tudo que aprendi sobre a Amazônia, sobre o Brasil, aprendi dos brasileiros. Algumas coisas de livros também que brasileiros e outros escreveram, mas o mais importante era a convivência com pessoas no Brasil e com as experiências deles e a qualificação, alta qualificação das pessoas que trabalham nessas áreas no Brasil. Obrigado, acho que eu já gastei meus 5 minutos e se tem alguma coisa que eu possa falar ainda, adicionar alguns pontos. Obrigado.
Thank you very much. I know, apologies, it is very hard, but we do want to stick to our timing so that we have enough time for our discussion at the end. But Dr. Thomas Fatheuer, thank you for raising some very important and interesting points. And now we would like to hear a different perspective on the report and its findings. And for that, I'm very pleased to introduce Ursula Vidal. She is Secretary of Culture of Pará, the region in the Amazon, and she also happens to be the climate reality leader of the Climate Reality Project, which was promoted by the Al Gore Foundation. She was also a fellow of the Lehman Foundation, the Political Action Network for Sustainability, and Renova BR, the largest school focused on training new political leaders in Brazil. So Ursula Vidal, thank you so much. We can't wait to hear your perspective. The floor is yours.
Gratidão, Marianna. Bom dia a todos. Aqui no Brasil, nós ainda estamos num período da manhã, às 10h40. Quero agradecer ao IFA, agradecer ao Pedro e à Marianna por essa oportunidade de falar com essa audiência e de ter participado não só como uma representante dessa arquitetura institucional do governo do Estado, como secretária de Cultura, mas também como um sujeito político, como uma jornalista e como uma pessoa que também formula uma crítica, um pensamento que se propõe a criar espaços para que essa nossa narrativa, a partir da Amazônia, seja uma fala, uma voz, um espaço de formulação considerado nesses acordos de cooperação nacional. Muita coisa já foi dita aqui pela Marianna e pelo Pedro em relação a esse desconforto. O próprio Thomas já trouxe aqui essa perspectiva de como há uma certa desconfiança em relação às intenções de países que são países desse norte global, que historicamente tem uma relação colonial, né, e uma relação de exploração de matéria-prima, de produtos primários e semi-elaborados de países do sul global que são exportadores dessa matéria-prima e que têm muito pouca capacidade, muitas vezes, de desenvolver um parque industrial que verticalize essa produção, que internalize, por exemplo, tecnologia e inovação para que a gente acesse melhores salários, um país mais desenvolvido. E a gente não está vendo isso acontecer na medida necessária nessa agenda global. É uma preocupação muito grande. Eu quero trazer para vocês uma perspectiva em relação, por exemplo, a essa Amazônia urbana. Vamos falar da Amazônia brasileira. Nós estamos falando de quase 30 milhões de pessoas, 80% dessas pessoas vivem em cidades, em meios urbanos. E cerca de 75% em pouco mais de 20 cidades. Então, a imagem, muitas vezes, que o mundo tem dessa Amazônia é uma imagem de um grande tapete verde, de um espaço de floresta, onde você tem poucos atores e poucos adensamentos urbanos. E isso é um problema nessa visão que também, de certa maneira, continua enraizando no território um comportamento muito colonial, porque você, quando olha para a política de conservação ambiental, você diz, eu preciso proteger o maciço florestal. E essas pessoas que estão lá dentro? E nós estamos falando de povos e comunidades tradicionais, que são muito importantes no processo de conservação ambiental e no alerta para o mundo. Quando o Pedro fala da tokenização, é uma preocupação que nós temos muitas vezes da exploração das figuras, dessas lideranças, de movimentos quilombolas, de trabalhadores rurais, de lideranças indígenas, e realmente elas têm nos dado o alerta necessário para que nós compreendamos uma dinâmica de respeito pelo fluxo das águas, das chuvas, do crescimento dessa diversidade, da biodiversidade biológica que nós temos, porque a nossa pressa, a nossa urgência de consumo capitalista realmente não entende o tempo que a biodiversidade tem para nos ensinar, e são esses povos que estão ancestralmente na floresta, na várzea, no campo, nos espaços, por exemplo, dos mangues, que são berçários de vida, que nos ensinam. Mas essas pessoas também se relacionam com essa urbanidade. E nós precisamos ouvir essa juventude, nós precisamos ouvir essas vozes que estão nesses espaços urbanos. Então, por exemplo, vamos pegar o exemplo do KfW, que é a principal entidade financiadora nessas cooperações de doações, por exemplo, do governo alemão para os grandes fundos. O KfW hoje é o segundo maior doador para o Fundo Amazônia, que é o principal fundo de financiamento para a política de conservação ambiental na Amazônia, muito calcada nessa questão do comando e controle, do reflorestamento, e que agora nós começamos a falar em bioeconomia. São fundos extremamente complexos de acesso. E quem é que acessa esses fundos? Organizações não governamentais de São Paulo, do Rio de Janeiro e de Brasília. Lamentavelmente, quando os amazônidas participam desses projetos, que na sua maioria são projetos para fazer diagnóstico sobre a Amazônia, e eu costumo dizer que a Amazônia é a região mais diagnosticada do mundo, porque nós sabemos quais são os problemas, onde estão os problemas, quem são os atores do problema, quais são as soluções e quem são os atores dessas soluções. Nós não aguentamos mais ver Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Brasília, ONGs que não são da Amazônia, acessando dinheiro internacional para fazer diagnóstico de problemas que nós já conhecemos, para nos dizer quais são as soluções para formulações das quais nós não participamos. Nós sequer somos ouvidos. E quando somos ouvidos, em geral, é para validar um processo de estudo feito por universidades do Rio, de Brasília, de São Paulo. Nós estamos enfrentando aqui questões muito graves de polêmicas que, lamentavelmente, excluem a ciência feita na Amazônia por universidades, por centros de pesquisa que estão aqui há dezenas de anos, como o Museu Guild, como o Instituto Evandro Chagas, como a Fundação Nacional Oswaldo Cruz, a Fiocruz, como as universidades federais, todas as universidades estaduais, e essas pesquisas são feitas por universidades do Rio e de São Paulo. Não que nós não consideremos a importância do desenvolvimento dessas pesquisas, da consolidação dos dados, do processo de articulação internacional com painéis científicos, que evidentemente nos coloca como amazônidas no imenso desafio. Mas nós precisamos protagonizar esse desenho de uma nova governança. Eu estou vendo que a Marianna está fazendo um aviso para mim aqui, só que ela fez um aviso em inglês e eu perdi. Fui tentar ler aqui, eu acho que já fui para o meu tempo, né? Eu tinha 5 minutos, Marianna, era isso? E já está acabando o meu tempo? Bom, eu tinha um monte de outras coisas para falar, mas eu sei que a gente ainda vai ter tempo para debater. E a minha preocupação maior, já concluindo aqui, é a seguinte: nós vamos ter crédito de carbono como um novo processo de um rearranjo desse mercado global. Nós vamos ter uma transição de matriz energética para uma economia verde. Nós vamos sair dos barões do petróleo para os barões da placa solar. Os amazônidas vão desenvolver tecnologia para que a placa solar vão conseguir uma governança local para que eles sejam os comercializem de uma forma com uma governança compartilhada esse crédito de carbono das suas reservas florestais, ou, mais uma vez, nós vamos só mudar a matriz energética, tentar desenvolver um processo de bioeconomia onde nós, novamente, estaremos à margem desse processo, sem que nós sejamos os protagonistas desse processo, com essa governança local desenvolvida, internalizando tecnologia e inovação para a nossa gente, que, inclusive, já desenvolve essa pesquisa. Eu te agradeço, Marianna, desculpa, perceba, sou jornalista e efusiva na minha gramática corporal, mas eu sei que a gente vai ter mais tempo. Eu agradeço imensamente por esse espaço.
Thank you very much, Vidal. It is indeed so hard to stick to our timing because, as we can see, this is such an important conversation that we need to be having. But an event like this, limited to only 60 minutes, is merely the start of a broader conversation. And I would like to now invite also the authors of the report, Pedro Vilfranco and Marina Caetano, along with you, Dr. Fatheuer, and you, Ursula Vidal, maybe to discuss with one another and also to answer some questions that some of our audience members can send in right now at any time in the next couple of minutes. But I would actually like to begin by looking at the final paragraph of the executive summary of your report, because this section was in bold, which signaled to me it was a very important point that you wanted to make with your report. And allow me to just read it quickly. It says, do not introduce or support directly or indirectly external practices, values, knowledge, arts, religion, culture, or agriculture with mechanisms that do not originate from the beneficiary community unless requested by the community. So this suggests to me that this kind of thing has been happening, and maybe it's even unintentional. So clearly there are some blind spots when it comes to German or even European climate engagement in the Amazon region. Where are these blind spots? Where do you see the pitfalls of how German organizations or European organizations are engaged in the Amazon? Maybe that's a question for Pedro Ivo Franco and Marina Caetano.
I think we also used on purpose a word, a terminology that it's tricky and that we used in this paragraph as a provocation, that is beneficiaries, because we tend to think about beneficiaries, the ones who are receiving the benefit of the other. But who is benefiting this relationship? This is the first provocation in this paragraph, so that the reader can think about it. And yes, I think these intentional and unintentional influences are happening since ever, since the Portuguese arrived in Brazil, basically, bringing everything that we know, and it's still happening nowadays. Now we have the presence of the religious representatives from Brazil and from outside, from abroad. We have the presence of companies, even though they are companies, some of these companies have a great share belonging to the governments. And this is not only from Germany to Brazil. We are talking in this research about the relationship from Germany to Brazil and vice versa, but we can go even broader and beyond. So that's why we also brought this perspective of the good and the bad twin. Now we are very familiar in our soap operas here in Brazil with this twin situation in which there is one good one that somehow, in our case, the international cooperation towards the Amazon, and a potential or a bad one that are the companies who extract, who destroy the forest somehow, and destroy the ecosystem and also interfere with the life of many people as well. So that's why we are dealing with this topic of interference through this way. We brought it through the cartoon, which is a very light but straightforward way to explain it. I don't know if Marina wants to add something to that. Maybe Marina?
Yeah, no, just to quick comment on that is when we use still beneficiary because it's a common language now, and when we are talking about international cooperation, but I guess we should actually think about it in a different way as partnerships, because when you think of beneficiary, you're thinking about someone actually standing and receiving help and receiving some kind of support. And I think the idea here is going for co-creation, and I think to be very honest, from my experience within the German international cooperation, this is a topic that has been brought. Now, it doesn't mean it's not being discussed. It needs to be advanced, but in many projects, the topic of what happens and consultations and proactive listening is being done. We need to advance it, of course, but we have good examples of it. And when we think about, for example, the Amazon Fund with this steering civil society committee, and actually the decisions are being made to Brazil, I guess it's a very good example of how those things could be done in a different sense. And just to comment very quickly on what Ursula brought, I think this discussion is very important, especially when it comes to Latin America and the commodities, the resources that are being used. As, for example, when you think about the critical minerals that needed to be used for a just energy transition, for example, electrical cars and batteries and so on, it means more exploitation of natural resources here. And I mean, so this is a topic that needs to be addressed considering all parts. And I mean, yeah, that's my 2 comments by now.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, it's clear that there's also two sides to it. There needs to be sort of awareness on the one hand of those international organizations and companies who want to do their projects in Brazil, but we also want to see the people from the region empowered. So I'm curious to hear what you believe is the best way to empower people in the Amazon region so they have a stronger voice, not only internationally, but also within Brazil itself. So maybe this is a question for Ursula Vidal and possibly Thomas Fatheuer. Ursula, I would love to hear your take on this. How can we empower the people in the region?
Mariana, eu acredito que é pela política, e isso não acontece só em relação a esse norte global. Nós estamos falando, evidentemente, do Brasil, da Amazônia, mas nós sabemos que isso aconteceu durante muito tempo em relação ao continente africano. E nós já temos um exemplo do que não funcionou no continente africano. Existe um estudo, por exemplo, de Jeffrey Sachs, do Banco Mundial, que é um economista importantíssimo, que diz que esse norte global colocou no continente africano 4 vezes o valor suficiente para acabar com a fome. E não acabou. Por quê? Porque nós não tivemos um investimento nessa governança local, nesse fortalecimento desses atores locais. Então, há uma preocupação muito grande, por exemplo, no próprio Brasil, de quando a gente vê que Brasília, o próprio governo federal precisa compreender melhor como essas vozes da Amazônia, nas regiões mais remotas da Amazônia, precisam ser ouvidas. Quando nós falamos, por exemplo, de 30 milhões de pessoas vivendo na Amazônia e de que 80% dessas 30 milhões vivem em cidades, não adianta, por exemplo, o Fundo Amazônia, e nós estamos falando aqui da cooperação internacional com a Alemanha. A Alemanha como o segundo maior financiador por meio do KfW do Fundo Amazônia. Não adianta colocar recursos somente nessas áreas protegidas, unidades de conservação, áreas de proteção ambiental, florestas nacionais, onde você precisa conservar esse maciço florestal para fazer uma mediação climática, para garantir um sequestro de carbono, para que você tenha planos de manejo controlados, cadastro de ambiental rural, entendendo toda essa bagunça fundiária que nós temos na Amazônia, se você não investe, por exemplo, fortemente nessa relação do urbano com o rural, do urbano com a floresta. Porque você vai conservar e a pessoa tem fome na cidade, a pessoa não tem acesso à água potável. Eu estou falando de Belém, por exemplo, que é a capital, que vai recepcionar agora a cúpula dos países amazônicos em agosto, 8 presidentes, que em 2025 vai recepcionar a COP30, e nós vivemos numa cidade que é uma região metropolitana de 2 milhões de habitantes, onde nós temos 10% de saneamento básico, 7% de esgoto tratado, que as pessoas morrem de verme e de virose, e de diarreia, que são doenças absolutamente evitáveis por um serviço urbano que as cidades amazônicas não têm condição de dar. Então, nós estamos falando de um desenvolvimento que vai para além desta plataforma somente da conservação ambiental, porque a conservação ambiental, o desenvolvimento da bioeconomia e o desenvolvimento de uma economia verde e a transição energética precisa de uma região desenvolvida. E aí, é o fortalecimento das mulheres, é o fortalecimento das cooperativas de mulheres, de movimentos de juventude, do empreendedorismo feminino, principalmente de mulheres. Porque, por exemplo, vou usar novamente o exemplo de Belém, porque Belém é uma cidade que vai se projetar no mundo por conta dessa agenda de grandes eventos que vão acontecer. Nós temos metade das famílias de Belém chefiadas somente por mulheres, a outra metade por homens e mulheres. Então, nós temos uma pobreza muito grande de mulheres que são 3 gerações morando numa mesma casa. Uma avó de 50 anos com uma filha de 30, com uma neta de 15, que está grávida do 2º filho. Percebe como nós temos um mapa da exclusão social que precisa ser enxergado, porque a gente precisa que essa esse desenho de desenvolvimento ele seja mais amplo. Ele não seja só para onde o meu olhar enxerga o verde no mapa. Né?
All right, I would, we are conscious of the time. I hope it's okay that we are going a couple of minutes after the planned hour for this event, because I do want to read a question that was sent in by one of our audience members, our participants. Anna Wolf wrote in this study, you focus on climate perspectives. Do you think that your findings can be transferred to the biodiversity policy in the Amazon or nature conservation perspectives in general? So this is a question from Anna Wolf.
Thank you, Marianna. Thank you, Anna, for your question. Yes, definitely. When we are talking about, of course, climate policies, it goes through nature conservation, it goes through biodiversity policies in Brazil. They are not, they are integrated. Yeah, this is not something you can put in different boxes. And this is actually one of the problems in policies sometimes, that they are looking whether it's conservation, whether it's climate, whether it's social, whether it's talking about indigenous people. And when they're being developed, and this is, of course, pretty much a role of the Brazilian government with maybe some support of international cooperation, they should be taken in consideration. So indeed, yes, one of the main problems right now in the Amazon when it comes to climate perspectives is deforestation, and you need to help deforestation. In order to do that, you have to address the socioeconomic challenges of the region. You not be able to actually help deforestation if you don't address those issues integratedly. So I think, yeah, this I would say this, we can transfer some of the findings to those biodiversity policies and nature conservation perspectives. I don't know if Pedro has also something to comment on this question.
Thumbs up. Okay. Thank you very much, Marina Caetano, and also Anna Wolf. I have a comment that was sent in from Regine Schönenberg, and her comment is, this problem of external actors from southern Brazil that Ursula mentioned has been discussed already during the PPG7. We are talking of a kind of epistemic colonization because already the questions risen are biased. So that was a comment from Regina. Does anyone want to respond to that? Dr. Thomas Fatheuer, yes?
Muito obrigado por essa pergunta. Essa observação, acho que é muito importante isso, a causa que a Ursula já falou. Então, realmente, você pode observar que o Fundo da Amazônia, como exemplo, né, o acesso é muito difícil para entidades de base, para até ONGs bem estruturados, é muito difícil. Então, e não são só as entidades do Rio, São Paulo e Brasília que tiveram acesso aos fundos, são as entidades internacionais, como Conservation International, TNC, The National Conservancy. Então, mais perverso ainda que uma parte do dinheiro do Fundo da Amazônia vai para entidades internacionais como WWF, talvez a mais famosa. Então, acho que isso tem que ser pensado no Fundo da Amazônia, tem que mudar essa política. Eu vejo um sinal positivo no debate de abrir o Fundo da Amazônia para fundos específicos de populações específicas. O maior exemplo é o Fundo Prodali, dos povos indígenas, que tem uma proposta de um fundo que está gerenciado pelos povos indígenas. Acho que isso é uma novidade dentro do contexto da cooperação, e eu espero que a cooperação tenha abertura para essas novas propostas e não matar eles com burocracia, exigências, etc., etc. Então, eu acho que a crítica é pertinente, mas no momento como nesse nosso novo governo, como a participação dos indígenas no governo, eu vejo a perspectiva para uma mudança que realmente sai desse esquema de entidades do Sul e internacionais que têm acesso. Obrigado.
Thank you very much. We have another question from one of our participants. Naomi Martin asks, thinking about the future, how can Germany and Brazil have a better partnership towards COP in Pará, considering culture, education, and climate? So who would like to respond? How can Germany and Brazil have a better partnership as we look towards COP in Pará, considering culture, education, and climate?
I can say a few things, and Marianna, perhaps this is also good for you because it's about the future, perspectives in the relationship. But for instance, now we have in Belém do Pará one office of the AD, from the AD, with one person there. And in the whole region, the whole legal Amazon region, there is a Goethe Institute Centrum, which is also headed by and run by one person. So if we are talking about improvements in the cooperation, improvements in the partnership, and if the region is really relevant, we consider that this presence should be a bit more considerable. And also the other way around, the presence of Brazilian artists from the region, the presence of Brazilian academics from the region, from people dealing with traditional knowledge from the region, should be more consistent in Germany. So I think now the COP could create an environment, a good excuse, a positive excuse, so that the relationship improves itself. Now we have here Ursula from Pará, who will be able to talk about hundreds of cultural expressions, many things that could be present here in Germany as well. So these are things we are analyzing, but also advocating for, because we have as the objective, and we have therefore the mandate through the objective to suggest these spaces for debates and for conversations. So I don't know, Marianna, maybe you can add a few things about the future of this relationship as well.
I think I would like to pass the word to Ursula, because she's the one in Belém, she's the Secretary of Culture from the state, and I guess she would have a better saying on this question as me. Ursula, please.
Grata, Marianna. Eu sei que o nosso tempo está acabando. Nós estamos desenvolvendo um programa muito importante na Secretaria de Educação, que traz para dentro da formação, desde a educação básica até o nível médio, a educação para o meio ambiente, clima e sustentabilidade. E isso envolve todo um processo de cidadania cultural e climática, numa parceria com a Secretaria de Cultura, em todos os 144 municípios, e chamando os prefeitos e prefeitas para aderirem a esse programa. Eu acredito que ele terá resultados bastante disruptivos. Finalmente, nós vamos introduzir nesses sujeitos políticos em formação, que são crianças e jovens, esse conceito de um protagonismo que nós precisamos ter dentro de um processo cultural da nossa relação com a cidade, com o bairro, com a rua, com a comunidade, com o Estado e com essa agenda climática. E eu acredito que essa cooperação se dando nesse processo muito seminal, muito elementar de formação de novas consciências, ele tem uma capacidade de ter um resultado transformador bem importante nesse fortalecimento desses sujeitos políticos que precisam se apropriar dessa agenda climática e serem mais propositivos e efetivos politicamente para que nós sejamos atores mais relevantes na construção dessa nova governança que é global e que passa pela Amazônia. Aproveito para agradecer imensamente a riqueza desse debate e a oportunidade e o interesse do governo alemão em criar novas dinâmicas, inclusive, para compreender que a gente pode ter melhores resultados nessa relação de cooperação internacional. Gratidão, Mariannas. Gratidão, Thomas e Pedro.
Thank you, Ursula Vidal. Thank you, Thomas Fatheuer. Thank you, Pedro Ivo Franco and Marianna Caetano. We can see this is such an important conversation. We can only scratch the surface of all of these topics, but we, of course, will continue this conversation and continue to learn from one another. So thank you very much for your contributions. Apologies that we're a little bit over time, but I know that enough people are so interested and passionate about this topic that they are still with us. Of course, the study is out now, so you can access it either in English or Portuguese. And hopefully we will continue to discuss the findings of the report and study the results together with the broader community at the intersection of international cultural relations, development, cooperation, and also climate. So everyone, again, many thanks. This does bring us to the end of our event, and a huge thank you to the organizers and everyone who made this possible. Also, thank you, Aoife, but also to Lisa Woytowicz and her team for interpreting, so everybody could follow along in the language they're most comfortable with, and to everybody who joined us virtually. Thank you, everyone. Greetings around the world, and enjoy the rest of your day. All the best.